For years, his name was a joke. Daniel Jones, the draft pick New York never stopped regretting. Every turnover, every injury, every mistake only built the case that he was never meant to be a franchise quarterback. He wasn't the savior of the Giants, he was their reminder of failure. At least, that's what the world believed. But sometimes stories take turns nobody expects. In Indianapolis, Daniel Jones did not just show up to wear another uniform. He walked in with scars, doubt, and silence. And instead of breaking again, he began to rise. Calm throws, smart choices, and a confidence that fans had never seen before turned him from a forgotten name into the leader of a team desperate for direction. It's the kind of transformation that makes you stop and ask, was Daniel Jones ever truly a bust, or was he trapped in the wrong place all along? That answer became clearer only after one truth set in. Anthony Richardson, the young star the Colts trusted, could not hold the job, and that collapse opened the door for Jones to step into history. Don't forget to subscribe to Red Zone Report for more powerful NFL stories. His presence changed everything about the Colts. The offense looked sharper, the locker room steadier, and the fans finally had hope again. It wasn't about highlight plays or flashy numbers, it was about trust, something Jones had never earned in New York, but was now building in Indianapolis week after week. What makes this beginning so powerful is not just his performance, but the timing. The Colts were searching for stability after years of failure. Jones walked in when the team needed a leader most, and instead of breaking back into old habits, he grabbed that moment. And that's how the so-called bust turned into the savior Indianapolis didn't see coming. Anthony Richardson was supposed to be the answer. The Colts drafted him for his size, his speed, and his potential to be a new kind of quarterback in the league. Fans saw him as the future, the one player who could bring Indianapolis back to relevance. But what looked like the beginning of a long journey quickly turned into a test no one expected. Injuries struck early and often, cutting his time on the field short. Every glimpse of his athletic talent was followed by frustration as he couldn't stay healthy long enough to build rhythm. For a team searching for stability, that inconsistency became a heavy weight. The faith that once surrounded him began to crack. Then came the moment that stuck with everyone. Richardson admitted he stepped out of a game simply because he was too tired. It wasn't an injury, it wasn't strategy, he needed a break. For teammates fighting through pain and fatigue every snap, that admission hit hard. The young quarterback meant to inspire confidence suddenly raised doubts about whether he could handle the grind of the league. The Colts, caught in the middle of expectation and reality, turned to veteran Joe Flacco as a temporary fix. But instead of stabilizing the season, it only showed how fragile the roster really was. Losses piled up, momentum faded, and what was supposed to be Richardson's rookie campaign of growth turned into another lost year for the franchise. By the time the season closed, the story had shifted. The excitement around Richardson's potential was replaced by uncertainty about his future. He was still gifted, still full of upside, but the trust had slipped away. And it was in that silence, in that disappointment, that Daniel Jones found his opening. The Colts were not just dealing with one player's struggles. They were dealing with years of disappointment that stretched across the entire organization. 4 straight seasons had ended without a playoff run, and each year the gap between promise and reality grew wider. Fans were tired, the locker room was restless, and the pressure on leadership was reaching a breaking point. Division titles had become a memory, not an expectation. Since 2014, the team had not claimed the AFC South crown, and every attempt to climb back into contention seemed to fall apart before it truly began. In a league built on results, patience was gone. The demand for change wasn't just loud outside the building, it was echoing inside it too. Veteran quarterbacks had come and gone, each brought in to patch holes, but never to build a future. From aging names to short-term signings, the carousel under center turned into a symbol of instability. Every new arrival carried hope, but each departure left more frustration. The Colts were stuck in a cycle they couldn't escape. Even the players who had been consistent began to feel the weight of losing seasons. Leaders inside the locker room were worn down by the constant resets, and belief was hard to find. A team that once carried itself with pride looked more like a franchise drifting without direction. It was clear something had to break. That breaking point came in the form of a decision. The Colts could not keep recycling veterans and hoping for miracles. They needed someone who could steady the team and give them a real path forward. That search is what opened the door to a quarterback few people thought could ever be that answer: Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones entered Indianapolis with little fanfare. The headlines weren't glowing, and the expectations were almost non-existent. After being released by New York and serving as a backup in Minnesota, he arrived with a one-year contract that looked more like a trial than a future. For most of the league, his story was already finished. The deal was simple: $14 million for one chance to prove he still belonged. It wasn't the kind of contract given to a franchise savior. It was the kind handed out to a stopgap, a placeholder, someone to fill time until the real solution arrived. Nobody expected a comeback. And yet, that is what made his arrival so different. Jones had nothing left to protect. No massive contract to defend, no franchise legacy to carry. For the first time in his career, he walked into a locker room without the burden of outside hype. That freedom gave him something he had never truly owned before: a clean slate. At the same time, the competition around him was fierce. Anthony Richardson still carried the draft pedigree, and rookie Riley Leonard added another young challenger to the mix. On paper, Jones wasn't supposed to win that battle. He was just another name in a crowded room. But what nobody saw coming was how quickly he separated himself. With sharp execution and steady leadership, he began to shift the energy inside the building. The quarterback everyone labeled as finished was quietly turning into the one player the Colts could not ignore. Training camp turned into a proving ground. Every throw, every rep, every snap was measured against the weight of expectation. Anthony Richardson still had the raw athleticism, Riley Leonard carried promise as a rookie, but Daniel Jones brought something the others did not: calm under pressure. Slowly, that steadiness began to stand out. By the end of camp, the decision was unavoidable. Coaches named him the starter, not just for week 1, but for the entire season. It was a bold statement from a franchise desperate for stability. After years of quarterback rotation, the Colts had finally placed their trust in one man, and it was the quarterback most people thought was done. That moment should have been purely celebratory, but life inside the franchise was hit with heartbreak. Owner Jim Irsay, a man deeply tied to the team's identity, passed away suddenly. His loss shook the organization to its core. Players and coaches were left carrying both grief and responsibility heading into the season. The response was immediate. Win for Jim became more than just words. It became the fuel for the locker room. For Daniel Jones, it meant stepping not only into a new role as quarterback, but into a mantle of leadership at a time when the team needed unity more than ever. With the weight of expectation on one side and the pain of loss on the other, Jones walked into the season carrying both hope and history. The story was no longer just about his own redemption. It was about lifting a team, a city, and a legacy that suddenly meant so much more. The season opener set the tone. Daniel Jones came out firing, throwing 3 touchdowns and guiding Indianapolis to its first Week 1 victory in over a decade. For a franchise that carried the weight of that streak for years, the win felt like more than a game. It was a signal that something new had begun. Week 2 only added to the momentum. In a tight contest against Denver, Jones stayed composed until the final drive. With the clock running out, the Colts moved into field goal range, and the game was sealed at the buzzer. Back-to-back wins gave the team belief, and suddenly Jones looked like the stabilizing presence they had been searching for. By week 3, Indianapolis wasn't just winning, they were dominating. The offense had no turnovers, only a single punt across 3 games, and Jones was managing every drive with precision. His ability to control tempo and make the right decisions turned the Colts into one of the cleanest teams in football. For fans who once doubted him, the change was hard to process. The quarterback they mocked for years was now delivering efficient, mistake-free football. His accuracy, timing, and leadership were becoming the foundation of an offense that looked sharper than it had in years. In 3 short weeks, Daniel Jones went from forgotten backup to the face of a 3-0 team. Indianapolis had more than just a winning start. They had a reason to believe their quarterback was no longer a placeholder, but a leader writing his own second chapter. Before Indianapolis, Daniel Jones carried the heavy shadow of New York. Drafted 6th, he was expected to replace Eli Manning and become the new face of the Giants. From the start, the weight was unfair. Every snap was compared to a 2-time Super Bowl champion, and every mistake grew louder under the New York spotlight. There were moments of hope, a comeback win here, an athletic run there, but they never lasted. Turnovers piled up, injuries slowed him down, and coaching changes left him without consistency. Each season felt like starting over, and instead of building a foundation, his confidence eroded. Then came the contract,
4 years, $160 million, a deal meant to lock him in as the future of the franchise. But instead of security, it brought more pressure. When Saquon Barkley left for Philadelphia, fans blamed the team's decision to back Jones. And when results didn't come, the criticism turned harsh and unforgiving. By 2024, the Giants had seen enough. After a string of poor performances, Jones was benched for Tommy DeVito. Soon after, his release was made official. What began as a dream of carrying a legendary franchise ended with his name on the transaction wire, a symbol of wasted hope. Humbled, Jones spent the rest of that season in Minnesota as a backup. For the first time in his career, he wasn't expected to save anyone. He watched from the sidelines, reset his mindset, and waited. That quiet season away from the spotlight became the reset button he didn't know he needed. In Indianapolis, Jones found what he never had in New York: structure, belief, and